anti-Luther rhetoric, specifically from a Roman Catholic perspective. Now, the issue with Luther and Roman Catholics and the way that Luther is taught in Roman Catholicism is typically ahistorical, obviously, because if you're a Catholic and you learn about Luther, you're going to be taught that he was an enemy, he was trying to break away from the church. You're going to hear about how he's the first person to make the Protestant Bible, who selected all these books, but he rejected all these books. So he had an anti-historical, anti-Christian canon, right? Because you'll be taught that Rome supposedly created their canon back at some council back in the 4th century. It was a local council. It wasn't a worldwide universal church council, but that's what we're going to tell you. And they're going to tell you that because according to Rome's own criteria that they sometimes utilize when critiquing people, Rome didn't have an official canon until the Council of Trent, right, 16th century. So that's the problem with Catholicism and the way that they critique history. They critique history in a way that nobody else does. And that's because the church is their authority, sola ecclesia. Whatever the church says, whatever it has said in the past, is truth for them. Now that is changing because the church has become extremely liberal, very progressive, and very leftist in its thinking. That's because of liberation theology, thanks to the new Pope, Francis, and expect to see more of that. But I just want to talk about Luther for a minute, and maybe we can set this record rate a little bit. This record rate. The record straight. Let's set the record straight. Let's talk about Luther for just a minute. But first, let me get another set. Okay, so Martin Luther starts his life, or at least his story starts, somewhere in the 16th century, the beginning of the 16th century. Now, Martin Luther, for many reasons, a lot of them because of superstition that he inherited from his father, decides to pledge himself to become a monk because of a lightning strike. There's a lot of backstory, but we'll start right about there. So he pledges to become a monk. He becomes a monk, and he spends several years as a monk, and he tries to earn his righteousness, right? He tries to earn his salvation. He's extremely superstitious and extremely pious in a sense, not in an arrogant sense, but he is trying to earn his way into heaven the only way he knows how, the way that Rome has taught. That is through works. Because in Rome, if anybody says that you were saved by faith alone, you're anathematized. Thanks to the Council of Trent, we know that. So Martin Luther was trying to earn his way into heaven. And it is interesting that one of the quotes is, he says, if anybody could have gotten into heaven by monkery alone, it would have been me. So Martin Luther, after years and years of trying to earn his way into God's graces, realizes that something is wrong. He can never do enough. He can never do enough works. That's because he begins to realize that nothing he does earns himself an ounce or a scintilla of grace from God, because you can't earn grace from God. Scripture is very clear. So in 1517, everybody knows this infamous date, he nails the 95 Theses to the door at Wittenberg. And at the time, he didn't actually plan to start the Protestant Reformation. He was just nailing 95 Theses to a door. It was just a regular door in a regular church. Now you need to understand there's a lot of German nationalism behind what happens following that. But he wasn't trying to split from Rome. He wasn't trying to defy Roman authority. He was just putting up a debate topic because he wanted to debate these points where he found issues with Scripture and Rome. And he was also trying to make his school a little bit more popular and famous, again with that German nationalism, the rise of nationalism in Europe at the time, playing into that. But at the time, in 1517, he had no gumptions or desires to split from Rome. He was simply putting up 95 debate topics that he wanted to debate because he found issue between Scripture and what he was being taught. Not a horrible thing to do. And as I've said before, and I'll keep saying it because Rome keeps proving me right, is that Rome's version of history is only applicable if you're a Roman Catholic. See, the problem with Rome is that Rome's interpretations are just that. They're Rome's interpretations. And if your interpretation or version of history is the only one like it, and everybody else has something else or says something different, well, there's an issue. Obviously, we know that the world and secularism has taken its toll in history and the way that people view it. So there is obviously some issues with some historical, with the lens with which people view history. That's obviously an issue. And the way that secular people view history is obviously different in many times than the way that Christians view history. But then and again, history is not something that can be hidden. People have been trying to hide history since history began. But the problem is that history doesn't stay hidden. History is readily available. Having got my history degree, I could tell you it's actually not that hard to find true history, to find out what actually happened. It may take a little digging. You may have to get past the surface level, shallow, subjective interpretations. You may have to look through some Dan Brown Da Vinci Code garbage in order to find out that Constantine didn't create Christianity, that the books that we find in the New and Old Testament weren't chosen at the 325 at the count. Anyways, yeah, we all know 325, infamous date, Constantine, very infamous. Now, unfortunately, fiction does spill over sometimes. But Dan Brown has been torn apart many, many, many times. And the Council of Nicaea was just that, the Council of Nicaea. Nothing was created there. And this fictitious version of history is easily disprovable. And likewise, Roman Catholic versions of history are easily disprovable too. And if you're a Roman Catholic and you're watching this and you're thinking, well, you're just saying that because you're a Protestant, you're Reformed, you're just saying this because you're trying to discredit Roman Catholicism. Well, like I said, history is easily available. I would suggest going to ccel.org, and you can read some of the early church fathers there for free. It's a good website. They have a lot of church fathers there. They have a lot of stuff from the early church. But all you have to do is read Scripture, right? Both Christians and Catholics affirm that Scripture is theopneustos. It's God-breathed. And I know that Rome likes to pretend that it doesn't trump Scripture, but we know that it does. They think they do. And so if you can find Scripture contradicting Rome, well then, according to Rome's own words, Scripture should be the higher authority, technically, but it's really not. For instance, when you speak about the Mass, I know this is a little bit different. When you read what the Mass is, according to the Catechism, and you go and you read Hebrews 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, you find a lot of contradictions. You find a lot of issues. You find it's almost as if the writer of Hebrews was speaking directly against the mass. Obviously, it was before Roman Catholicism was even formed, but it's almost as if he's speaking directly against it. Well, how do you reconcile those two things, Scripture and Catholic practice proper? At the Mass, well, if you're Roman Catholic, you just ignore that and interpret it through the lens of Roman Catholicism and what you've been told, because sola ecclesia. Oh no, I got off on a little tangent there. We were mostly talking about Luther, but I would suggest maybe reading some of what Luther wrote, not what people say about Luther, not what they say about what he wrote. Read what he was saying before 1517, leading up. Read some of his letters. Read some of the issues he had with his salvation strife. That might be a good way to put it. Yeah, just read some of that. You can see for yourself what it says and reconcile that with what you've been taught by Rome, and you'll see that there's a contradiction. All right, guys, I hope this has helped. Had a good back day, which has been interesting. I like doing this. I like doing the back day or workout days and talking theology, because I'm usually rambling about theology in my mind while I'm working out anyways. So I might as well talk about it and make a video. So let me know what you think about Luther. If you're Roman Catholic, what have you been... Ooh, this would be good. If you're Roman Catholic, put in the comments down below things you've been taught about Luther by Roman Catholics, by a Roman Catholic bishop or a cardinal or a priest, or what you heard from Catholic Answers. Put what you've been told about Luther in the comments down below. I'd love to look into them and compare what you've been told with what we find in history. All right, thanks for stopping by, guys. I'll see you later.